Hello and welcome to the KOFISI Connect podcast, your source for a wealth of roundtable discussions on the workplace and business, as well as cultural news and trends from the diverse and dynamic continent of Africa. I'm your host, Richard Okenye, and today I'm very pleased to reintroduce Gathoni Ngumba from Afripods and to introduce Melissa Mbugua from Radio Workshop to discuss audio storytelling for Africa's future. Radio Workshop trains youth across Africa to make radio and podcasts, and these are a new generation of African journalists, thought leaders, and storytellers. Afripods is an Africa-first podcast hosting and distribution platform that is focused on building the largest library for African audio storytelling on the planet. And ahead of Africa Podcast Day, celebrated at KOFISI Kaskazi on 12th of February, we're having this conversation to see how we can build community, learn about podcasting, and also brand storytelling. Welcome, both of you. Welcoming back, Gathoni, and also welcoming for the first time, Melissa. How are you doing this morning, Melissa?
Really good, actually.
Yeah.
I love being in this type of setting, in the studio, recording.
Yeah.
This
is your
being with Gathoni.
Podcaster
yeah,
through and
yeah, talking about the thing we love talking about, which is podcasting.
Yeah. It's a walk in the park for you.
No, not necessarily. I mean, yes, in the sense that it's pleasant, but it's not a walk in the park in the sense that I can just, it's not effort.
Okay.
It's effort.
It is effort.
Yeah.
It looks effortless.
Yeah.
It is effort. Yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome back, Gathoni. I'm seeing
Thank you.
every other month, it seems.
We're doing well.
Yeah.
We're building community. We're doing what we can. So get ready to be tired of my face.
Seems that might not happen. Yeah. So ahead of Africa Podcast Day next week, we're going to tackle a lot of this conversation on building infrastructure for African audio storytelling. And as for KOFISI's sake, we will also look at brand storytelling. How can businesses within our community also use this chance of the growth in audio storytelling in the continent to also position themselves or offer thought leadership? That I'm reading from notes provided by Gathoni from last week's masterclass, which is a good start to my year. What are you looking forward to, Gathoni? For Africa Podcast Day, just a general.
I think for me, I feel like podcasting as a medium is very internalized. It's very individual. So I always like when we have spaces when podcasters can come together, because you never know what will happen. You never know what conversations will happen. Podcasters will never stop talking. So it's fun to be in the spaces where it's like their brains work on overtime and you just get to sit in the greatness of it. So for me, Africa Podcast Day this year was important to have people together in person, because we've done it virtually in the previous 2-3 years. But it's just, everyone's just like, I don't know how to get to this person. How do I get to this person? It's also an opportunity for the big podcasters to meet those who are just starting. And because I feel like podcasting doesn't have gatekeeping yet, you can ask those questions of, a brand came to me. What do I tell them? Or how do I write a rate card? Or my mic is making a noise. How do I, that kind of thing. So being able to have a space for that to happen is what I look forward to. I like podcasters.
Nice. Melissa, you're in that intersection of radio and podcasting. We'll get into that later. And the difference or the similarities thereof. And the big question of, is radio dying? So just a teaser on what to look forward to in the next few questions. But for Africa Podcast Day, from where you sit at, what is your biggest excitement?
That I get to be in a room, actually physically hanging out with the podcast community, which hasn't happened, as Gathoni said, in a few years. I think the last gathering was 2021. No, 2022. And it's always such a vibe, because it's also a new community. So it's a really great way to expand your network. That sounds cliche, but for real, you just meet different people. And the city is changing, Nairobi is changing so much and has changed so much since the last time we gathered for Africa Podcast Day. So many new shows have come up, so many new ways of doing things. So I'm just excited to be in a room with people, meet them, hear what's going on, learn, have fun and celebrate being African podcasters.
Right. That's great. I'm looking forward to it too. And to this podcast, which is technically a podcast about podcasts. So I'm hoping we will, get to tackle a lot of what young podcasters are looking forward to, or even established podcasters who might pick something along the way. To you both, and to start with Gathoni here, as this Africa has the world's youngest mobile first and multilingual generation. Why is audio and podcasting in particular an important medium for Africa at this very moment?
I think because for us as Africans, radio has always been our primary medium. We are traditionally orators. Well, historically not. We used to write, but then when it was taken away from us, not to be political, but we became orators. It's how we told our stories. It's how we passed down history. It's how we let people know what was happening. So I think it's just something, it's a medium that comes naturally to us. And so I think there's a lot of growth potential there. It's a space for us to be able to hold our history. You talked about languages. It's a space for us to be able to accept who we are, speak our languages, just exist. Because I feel like a lot of the other mediums, because they've existed for so long, there's so many rules around them, and the rules don't necessarily, they haven't been formed and created by us. And so even when it comes to talking about or talking in our mother tongue and all of that, there's very specific things you can talk about, things you can't talk about. And I'm like, podcasting doesn't have those limitations yet. So you genuinely can do whatever you want. Also, I always say Africa's story should be told by the people who know her best.
Right?
And I feel like podcasting is the easiest because you just need a phone. Like you're talking about mobile first, you genuinely need your phone. And all phones come with a voice recorder app.
Mm-hmm.
You just click record on that and you can record in your house under a blanket. Nowadays, the noise cancelling is excellent on the phones. You probably don't even need to go under your blanket. Not all phones. If you're an iPhone person, it then come with headphones. But most phones come with the headphones. So you put that in, put it on your phone. You've recorded a podcast. I mean, it's so easy for people to do it. So I think that's why it's important because we haven't told our stories yet.
Yeah.
And so podcasting.
Very important. Melissa, radio and podcasting is something that you're actively trying to help youth across Africa, in terms of skills, resources, networks, as you did mention, for them to tell their stories. First, what makes podcasting different from radio or similar before we get into, how this is important now in this age?
Yeah, what makes podcasting different is what Gathoni said, that the mic now moves into anyone's hands. The power is in the hands of the people, right? Of the young people themselves. And so they don't have to wait for some gatekeeper or some person who is perceived to have authority to come and ask them for their story or give them permission to tell their story, and also mediate their story for them, tell their story to the world on their behalf. So now young people can, because of podcasting, can just go out there, tell their story as they will, and build a community around that and connect with whichever audience around the world cares to listen. And that's so powerful, especially for Africa, which historically has, on the global stage is just forgotten or viewed as not valued. So podcasting gives us a chance to value and validate and see ourselves and see each other as Africans, and also to just be out there in the world and be like, hey, actually we're here. We're not going to wait for you to to say we're here. We already know we're here and we're telling you we're here.
Yeah. I've just had a nostalgic moment and I did speak about this before we started. I used to be on radio. I started off on radio, my whole media and journalism journey. I started on radio in campus. And the biggest thing on a selfish level that I think podcasting allows me to do is to, one, have that portfolio with me. Because when I went to radio, it would be in thin air. I used to say I have never had myself on radio because I can't listen to myself on real time outside the studio. But now podcasting allows me to go back and sit like an audience member and listen to myself, critique myself, which is really good. And also helps me as, a way to document my portfolio. I can easily share links to my podcasts rather than, tell you, believe me, I used to be on radio. I used to be on air. It's somewhere in the air, somewhere out there.
Yeah.
So it's a really good medium, and it's a radio in your pocket, literally. You can work with it. And for business, even speaking from a KOFISI standpoint, is you are working with a marketing tool in your pocket. You don't need to go and write emails to a radio station. I'm not saying you shouldn't. If it serves its purpose, but you have that radio station with you. You don't need to wait for a commercial break to talk about your business. You can do it, the whole thing. The commercial break can be the one that's not about the business. So it is, on a selfish level, just encouraging people to know that this is something that you have with you. Whether you're a young person trying to document your journey or document your career or whatever that is, or even break out into media and journalism. Africa Podcast Day is marked on 12th February. How did this come about? I could start with Melissa. How did this come about? Could you walk us through, and why specifically 2 days before Valentine's?
Well, that's one way to look at it. The other way that I look at it is it's 1 day before World Radio Day, which is on February 13th. And radio is still, surprisingly, we take it for granted, but I think that's what happens when something has just been around for so long and is still relevant. It's still globally the most trusted source of media, because most people, especially outside of the so-called developed world, I have air quotes on, don't have access to internet because it's not affordable. Data is still too expensive, electricity, and so on. So radio is still really big, even though for us who live in the cities, we kind of forget about radio sometimes. But anyway, so to your question, I'd been working, Gathoni and I were saying earlier how we feel like grandmothers of podcasting in Africa, because I've been working on podcasting, just being curious, doing research since 2017. And then in 2019, I got this idea to start a podcast conference or podcast festival for Africa, which then became Africa Podfest. And so on the back of that, the first one was supposed to happen in March 2020, but it didn't because COVID. However, in the lead up to that, I and my co-founders, Josephine and Paula, at the time were working together. We had this idea to then put together Africa Podcast Day as something that would be annual, perpetual, sort of bigger than any festival we could organize, and that could be owned by the podcast community, which at the time was so much smaller than it is now. We didn't even think it would grow this fast. And then when we're thinking about dates, it just made sense because World Radio Day, we wanted to pay homage to World Radio Day and also to put it together next to World Radio Day because it's about audio, to help, because it's for the ecosystem to kind of make it easier to celebrate both things close together. And also it was also strategic because by positioning it next to World Radio Day, we wanted to increase the likelihood that it would become visible and grow. Yeah. So it was created just as, how these days are, it's like a campaign, a brand around it, a story that people can take and own and do whatever they'd like to do with the day.
Right.
Yeah.
Gathoni, this is like Christmas for your community.
Honestly, it is. It is like Christmas, and we genuinely have Melissa, Josephine, and Paula to thank for it, because I feel like a lot of times, and it goes back to this thing we're talking about, storytelling and everything. A lot of times when you're doing something, we feel the need to ask for permission to do the thing. And in Africa Podfest, creating Africa Podcast Day, they were just like, we're African podcasters and we deserve a day to celebrate. And so here's our logic behind it. And this is the day. And it has been taken on by the African podcasting community. So we've been celebrating, I think, 2020, it was at Lava. You did the thing at Lava Latte.
We organized it. It was in person, yeah.
It was in person, and it was during the time when we were trying to figure out what is this COVID. Then there was meant to be a festival, it didn't happen. there's a time they did like something online across the continent, and it's like people are writing. It's just like, who are all these people? And like for us last year, we did something virtually as well, and it was like 8 African countries. It was 8 to 10 African countries, and it's everyone getting their own. It was a live session, and I'm just sitting in my house, just being like, okay, Zimbabwe needs to be on, and it's just, it seems very insane to think that 8 countries on the continent, west, south, east, central, it's just everyone's come together with a story to be able to celebrate. But at the same time, if you're not in podcasting, you're like, what is this
What is
day?
going on?
Also, there are podcasters who don't know about Africa Podcast Day still.
Yeah.
But like she's saying, there's a lot of growth we've seen as the grandmothers in podcasting through the years. How many people are in the space, how they celebrate it. There's ownership around it. The communities are doing things. We know in Uganda they're celebrating, APVA are celebrating, the Nigerian podcasting community is celebrating. Normally Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa will do things. And in South Africa, it's every different corner of South Africa is doing its thing. So I'm just like being able to watch it from it being a concept, because I very luckily was around to see the concept of it. But I'm like, from it being a thing that Melissa, Josephine, and Paula thought about, to now being able to see all of these countries participating.
It's amazing.
Man.
Yeah, it's amazing. And we're still
really is
we're
wild.
still in the early days, right?
Honestly.
Yeah.
Momentum is just building.
Momentum is
Yeah,
just
because a
building.
lot more people will find out about it, and then as they find out, it could be, it has potential to be so much bigger. Like Melissa was talking about having the festival. This is the thing you can plug the festival around. It's just like, come, we'll do maybe from the 10th or from the 11th, and then 12th is like the last day, big dates, Africa Podcast Day, and you're able to bring in people from everywhere. I think it has such potential. Yeah.
There's something else actually. There has been for decades International Podcast Day, which is September 30th in the States, and so we actually learned, because the podcast community is tends to be so generous and open. We actually had a call with the founders of International Podcast Day and asked them questions about how do we put this together. And so I want to say this came from support. We were able to do this because we also just leaned on the support of the the founders of IPD. But then, of course, as you know, it's quite a huge global day.
Right.
And they also stepped back from actively organizing it, but it had run for so long that it now has legs of its own. And I dream that Africa Podcast Day will also get to that place where it's just ubiquitous. You even forget like where it came from, sort of.
I don't think we should forget.
Well, not forget.
She's selfless.
Take for granted in that way that
she is
because
like,
it's
don't
just
talk
been
about
there.
me. I'm like, no, we'll talk about you forever.
So what does this mean? What does it mean for audiences, Gathoni, for audiences, for creators? As you said, there are some creators who are not aware of Africa Podcast Day. What does this mean for them and for their audience, and for brands that want to also, become a part of it?
I think for creators, it's an opportunity to be able to see the people in your space, figure out who it is you can collaborate with, learn from them, talk to them, and do all of these things. For the audience, it's the best day to be able to find new African podcasts, because everyone's like, I don't know if they're African podcasts. Follow the hashtag. I'm sure Africa Podcast Day, if you click on it now, there's a lot of podcasters across the continent, across the globe actually, who will use the hashtag, and you're able to have a lot of discoverability come from it. For brands, I think as it grows, it's an opportunity for you to attach to something, like the same way, if you think about like Jamhuri Day, and everyone's like, happy Jamhuri Day, if you're able to target podcasters, especially for brands that are, say, road and things like that, or if you're trying to get into the creative space in Africa, because now what we're seeing is a lot of podcasters are also doing podcasts, like video podcasts. So if you're trying to get into that space, it's a good opportunity for you to get audiences. Because the thing I wish brands and creators understood is, as you create your podcast, you're basically like a media house on your own, And so if I have ownership to an audience that you want, as a brand, you should be looking out for me. So not trusting, because a lot of what we're seeing is the brands are trusting the people who sell the advertisements to them and everything, and the agencies, and they're like, this is not who I want. But if the brand can have someone who like follows the hashtag, they can maybe notice a creator that they haven't seen before and it's probably not on the radar of the agency. If agencies can also check these things out, they'd be able to be like, oh, here's a new group of people who we can include in what it is we're doing. So I think there's space for everyone to figure out or learn or grow from the day. Yeah.
And there's a very interesting stat here that we have 570 million internet users in Africa. That's a big market. And for podcast discovery and consumption, brands can get into that space, creators alike. And this is a day for you to start on that journey of discovery and consumption of content that is very uniquely African. Radio Workshop Melissa is using creativity, local knowledge, to help youth articulate and tackle issues in their communities. What do you think, from your perspective, how does podcasting function more than media, more than having a media of your own? How is it used as that infrastructure for ideas, for culture, for civic participation? How exactly do they use podcasts to do this?
Well, podcasts are, the way for decades, there's been this conversation about the Africa passport. Is it Africa passport or Africa visa? Like we should just have free travel. Imagine if we had a rail network, and we keep complaining about how it's more expensive to go from Nairobi to Accra than from Nairobi to London. That's not right. So podcasts actually are already that railway network or that easy way to connect, because not just with Africans on the continent, but in the Africans in the diaspora as well, connecting to Africans on the continent. And I say this, it's also alluding to something Gathoni mentioned earlier about just the magic of Africa Podcast Day, where you just have people from so many countries you didn't know each other existed, and then you appear on this screen on Africa Podcast Day, and it's magical. And we're all like, I wish, like in 2021, 22, when we hosted Africa Podcast Day festivals virtually, there were people from all over the world meeting each other for the first time, having this conversation about African podcasts for the first time. We had live shows. It was such a great experience. And that's it. That's that Pan-African dream come true. Here we are already connecting with each other, exchanging ideas. Of course, because podcasts tend to give perspectives that, because it's from the ground. So it's the fresh take on Africa that you don't normally see in the media. And so you have, like, we now understand different perspectives about like people in Nigeria and their life here in Nairobi and in Senegal and in just spaces you'd never have ever connected before if it were not for podcasts. Like personally, I have a network of people I have never met in person, but I have worked with them. They're my friends.
100%.
Right? And it's all because of podcasting. And this is that huge, I think it's the AU Agenda 2063. It's already being fulfilled because of podcasting. It started being fulfilled without any grand, big, Afrexim bank loan, without any of that ginormous.
Though we want the money.
We want the money. I'm not saying we don't need the money. What I'm saying is that podcasting just arrived and it's already solving a lot of these problems. And it's already this powerful before we've even invested. So can you imagine what will happen now when the investment is put in and, to allow us to grow and for the podcast community to just implement all these really cool ideas that we have.
Yeah. Gathoni, historically, African stories have been told by other people. There's a very famous essay by Binyavanga on how to write about Africa, which is hilarious and eye-opening at the same time. Talk about the Maasais dancing at you at the airport when you arrive, speak of the safari, you go to Kibra and, say, thank God, I appreciate life more. I can see what other people are going through. Those are people telling our stories without understanding the context or anything else really that is African. How does podcasting shift this narrative power?
I think what it does is it allows the people who have been told their stories to have control over how the story is told. So if you think about Kibra, a lot of people will be like, it's the largest slum and blah. But when you're in the space, there's a time I used to do photography and I'd volunteer. And the kids are so happy and they're just like living, the absolute best life, joy. And it's the simplicity of that story where you look at it and you're like, I don't understand how the world is sad, worried, and woe is meing you when you probably have more joy than people who live the middle class life and have the big car and everything. So I'm like, it allows that child who grew up in that space to be able to come out and say, yes, I didn't have 3 meals a day, but I was able to do this. So as I walk to school every day, maybe there is a gang, but the gang would protect the children. And there was, there's a lot more nuances that if you're on the outside listening to, like watching a story, you're just like, oh no, how you poor child, you only had 2 meals a day. And they're just like, but from where I was coming from, this is what it is. Or having a mother who has to wake up because she doesn't have a car and can't afford transport, talking about how I walked all the way to industrial area. Because if you're around like 4:30, well, the middle class are jogging. There's people actually walking to work and doing all of this. So I'm like, what's the story of like that mother who has to walk to work, but she also has children who have to go to school, but she doesn't have the money to have the nanny, to take care of the children and make sure. So as you say, this is the most unsafe space, and I'm not saying it's safe, but I'm like, how does that child then who's 3, 4 manage to walk to school as well, even though their mother wasn't there? Those are stories, even though they're not glorious and beautiful, that I think should be told, because the stories that are being told are very monotone sometimes, I feel like. So I think it gives us the opportunity to tell those stories. It gives us the opportunity to, I remember there's a place I worked and people came in. We used to work with an office in Europe, and they came in the first time and they're like, oh my God, you guys have computers. And I'm like, but we wrote emails to you every day. And I know it sounds crazy. I'm like, this is in the 2000s. So I'm like, but if we're writing emails to you every day, but then when you go to a lot of the West and you watch even news, it's something as simple as when they say, and in Africa today, the backdrop changes into, that picture of the baby with the
yellow
fly
hue.
or like the desert. And it's just like, I get it. But I'm like, there's moments of celebration that we can have. Or even when we're telling the sad stories, right? If we're talking about whether it's murder or sexual assault or crime, whatever it is, there's a space for us to be able to tell the stories in the way we experience them, or even in our languages, having your grandmother tell a story about what it was like growing up during colonialism. Was it cute? Probably not. Your grandfather was probably in one of the camps. But I'm like, being able to hear him say it in the language and watch the expression, because there's something, even when you don't understand the language, that the expression can give you. And I feel those nuances are very important. So I think podcasting in that sense becomes very important for you to be able to grasp that element, keep our history, but also tell our stories, beautiful or not, but on our terms. Because I'm like, don't tell me that there's a child dying in Turkana. I want to go to Turkana and listen to them and hear them talk about, this is what's happening. This is, well, sitting on the largest water reservoir in I don't know how long, but we can't, like, our cows are dying of drought and this is why it's happening, or this is what my experience has been. I've grown up this long. Where are those stories? I think it's important to hear them from the people. Because even I don't think in my position I can tell those stories. So I think for me, it would be interesting to hear them
All right.
and podcasting.
That's really interesting. That nuance.
Yeah.
And podcasting. That nuance on, when I just randomly thought when you spoke of, speak to your grandmother, let her tell you of her days during colonial times. The story, that monotony you mentioned, the story mostly is, and then the colonialists came and beat us, and then, we won, and then we got independent. It could be a love story of my grandmother and my grandfather while he was struggling to,
Yeah.
so she's there every day thinking about this man cooking for him or something. It would be a very new angle with the nuance that we are telling that story.
Exactly.
Rather than looking at it from one angle. And it does really well, Melissa, when it comes to documentary and, narrative podcasting. Anything to add on that shift in narrative power? How is it working with Radio Workshop?
Yeah, so Radio Workshop, first, okay, so it's an organization that trains young people to make narrative audio. And it's also a podcast, as a documentary podcast, or, short, between like 20 to 30 minutes audio documentaries produced by young people across the continent. So literally, you can, listening to Radio Workshop, pick an episode, you'll learn something about Kenya from a perspective, being a Kenyan, it'll probably be a fresh perspective to you. Same as like learning about like something that struck me so much, I'll never forget. I learned about, in the climate, this climate conversation, there's something called the just energy transition. And it just sounds like, what is that? Like, don't understand what that is. And you read, no matter how much you read, it sounds so up there, that policy language. But there's a story about this family in South Africa that lives in a coal mining town. And now, because South Africa has adopted this renewables policy, so now they're transitioning away from fossil fuels, which is coal, into renewables. What's going to happen to all the jobs in this town? What's going to happen to these families and their lives? And then this particular episode traces this story of a young person talking about their family and all this uncertainty, how they're grappling with this. And so that's what helped me understand, okay, this is what the just energy transition is. And this is why it's relevant in Africa, because this climate conversations just sound like they're happening at wherever COP is happening. And then you wonder, a lot of times you ask yourself, so how is this relevant to me? Anyway, and that's the power of documentaries, because they're engaging. If they're done well, it doesn't matter where in the world this person is from and how different you may think you are, but because documentaries made well normally tap into just that universal human emotion and experience, you just feel connected. And so that's the power of narrative. That's the power of storytelling. And that's why I'm excited about what the future holds for African podcasting, because we have, for example, this work that we do and this training that we'd love to scale out and to have everyone in the podcast community who's interested to just gain these skills. Because when we think podcasts, so generally to anyone who isn't in the scene, when they hear podcast, they probably think interview or chatcast, kind of what we're doing. And that's only one type of podcasting. There's so many. You can have an audio theater, you can have an audio film, you can have documentaries, you can have musicals. There's so many different formats, and that's the freedom of podcasting, is that it can be whatever you want it to be. And so that's what we're doing as Radio Workshop, is trying to pass us along that skill of documentaries, which, in there it's about being able to plan a story, craft it, do high quality recording, basically making like audio journalists out of the African podcast community and leveling up our skills, because then stories are just way more compelling than monologues, or you all know this. You're creatives, you understand what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Audio journalist.
Yeah.
I like that. I should change my LinkedIn bio. I'm an audio journalist. Afripods works directly with creators all across the continent. Melissa just mentioned, podcasting is more than this conversation, interview. You could do much more. I like that. I actually never really thought that deep. So thanks for that shift in perspective. Are there any other trends, maybe, from what you've seen that podcasting is up to today that podcasters can?
Currently on the continent, a lot of people are going to video first, which is interesting for us because since podcasting is so new, since a lot of people are being introduced to it through videos, they feel like that's the only way to do the thing. And so there's a space to teach people about audio podcasting outside of video because I feel like they're not in competition with each other. There's a space for audio because if you think about everything that we have as a continent, if you're talking about phones, yes, we have smartphones, but a lot of them don't have space. So having a listening app is probably better than having a video app just based on also your data, all of these things. Being able to record on your phone is probably easier. Yes, you can record video on your phone, but editing it is easier on audio, small things like that. So I think in as much as video is a trend, and a lot of people think audio is dying, for me, a trend is that audio continues to exist. And I don't know that it should be considered a trend, but I'm like, audio is still a thing very much so, even though it's not as loud as video is. And I want people to know that and remember that because a lot of people don't tell their stories because of this. I don't want to be on video. I'm like, just do your audio story. You don't have to be on video. AI is coming into the space. There's a lot of like editing right now that people are using. I think people are using for scripting and things like that. There's people who are starting to use it as the narrators for their podcasts. I have feelings that I will not share on the matter because, listen.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, those are things that we're starting to see. And I don't think it's necessarily African only, it's a global trend. But a lot of people are starting to test AI and see what it is they can do with it. Scripting, mostly, a lot of editing, transcribing, things like that. So when it comes to accessibility and things like that, it's excellent. When it comes to people not having the knowledge, technical knowledge, like editing and things like that, it's excellent. But I feel like it's still a lot of machine learning happening. So there's a balance that I think we need to figure out. And then I think another trend is a lot of people are moving away from talk podcasts.
Yeah.
I think it's slowly becoming known.
Yeah.
That it's okay not to have you and your friends. Again, we love talk podcasts.
Yeah.
I listen to talk podcasts all the time. But there's a lot more documentary. I've seen a lot more people coming in with like you're talking about. There's someone who has a podcast. I don't know, I can't remember the name right now. But it's genuinely a story it's a fictional story about a child in the UK who was sent back to Africa. And his experience now in high school, being the kid with the accent and and being the cool kid, but being like, oh my God, I was told I'm here for 2 weeks. And that, it's a very, you understand the African experience of just being like, if you're anywhere, that you'll be sent shags, you'll be sent up country if you're in the country. But if you're far away, it's like, we'll send you back home. And it's very interesting to be able to see such things. Or there's like a lot of crime podcasts coming up as well.
True crime, yeah.
There's true crime. There's a crime. There's one in Kenya. Crimes and consequences, something like that. And she talks about like the crime, but from the perspective of the person who was attacked.
Yeah.
And actually goes through. So it's really fascinating to see the ways people are choosing to use podcasting. Any other trends I forgot or haven't mentioned?
Yeah, I think you mentioned them all. I just feel also strongly about, especially for podcasters or aspirational podcasters, aspiring podcasters who are listening to this. Do not feel like you must go into what the trend is. So right now, if it's video, that you have to follow that format. There's still so many people who prefer audio, number one. And also people consume different sorts of media in the media universe, even when you think about a day in your life, right? You'll watch stuff, but when you're maybe commuting, you listen to audio only because audio is portable, it's more accessible. So, throw away the box is what I would say. And also another reason why podcasts are so popular with creators is because they don't, if your strength is you have personality that comes through in speaking, and your thing is not, then you can, audio is your space. If your strength is you're that visual person, then go for a video podcast, but don't feel like you have to go either one way or the other because of a trend. And trends come and go. Remember when blogging used to be a thing?
But that's the
And now
thing.
it's not.
But it still
It's still
is.
there, but it's not.
Because I'm like, if
the
you think
thing
about,
we're talking about.
it's not what we're talking about, but you think about how big Substack is.
Yeah.
And this is the thing I want people,
Yeah.
genuinely, if you like the thing, do the thing, because even when it doesn't seem like
It's a
everyone's
trend.
talking about it, it's still a
there.
thing. And
Yeah.
the people who read, I mean, I'm subscribed to so many Substacks. I'm like, I still read all the time.
Yeah.
And newsletters are still a thing. So I'm just like, if it's not trendy, still do it even if it's not trendy. Yeah.
And even on social media now, on Twitter, currently X, there's long form is back.
Right.
People just got awarded $1 million for long form content every month.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you are doing the thing, just do it. Even if you have no crowd to cheer you, they'll come back either through a Substack or WordPress or whichever way it will evolve to becoming. Are there still any structural challenges that podcasters are facing? I know there are political challenges, which could be a whole podcast on its own, on what can we speak, what can we not, what do we do, what is shown, and, people say things and they disappear in some places. So on structural challenges, anything that, an aspiring podcaster can be aware of. I know you mentioned AI, so I'm thinking even on the creative level, that's a bit easier now. You can, they're still learning, but you can throw in a podcast and get it edited in some app, get a thumbnail, get that. It's a bit, that entry is getting easier. Are there other challenges that haven't been sorted out yet?
I think for us, it would be data. I think it would be marketing. Discoverability is an issue in podcasting, not in Africa, in podcasting as an ecosystem internationally. And part of it, I feel like, is a lot of times when I have a podcast, I'll say I, so that it don't feel like I'm attacking anyone. If I have a podcast, I'm like, this was such a good idea, and I put it out, and then I'm like, and the people shall come. And there's a thing I feel like as creatives we do where it's just like we get so lost in the creative process, and we don't realize. I think Dana said Sema Box is the one who always says, think of your podcast as a business. And once your business has a product, you have to do marketing. You have to have known who your audience is. You have to do. There's so much work involved in podcasting that I feel like a lot of people don't take into consideration when they're starting their podcast. So for me, I don't know if it's structural, but I wish people would take more time to understand why they're doing their podcast and do all of the work behind it and then market after, so that then the frustrations don't end up happening. Like, I've been putting out episodes and no one's finding it, but it's like, have you put it out anywhere for people to try and find it? Because again, discoverability is the structural issue. So how do you help yourself? Is it coming to spaces like the event we're going to have on Africa Podcast Day and being like, I know there's a podcast I met who had a QR code. And so you scan the QR code and it takes you straight to their podcast. Is that what you're going to do? Are you going to be like Yes Girls, who everywhere they go, they have the jumper that says Yes Girls podcast? And you're going to be like, okay, why Yes Girls? It's going to be a conversation starter. Is that what you need to do? Do you need to have, I don't know, a hat with some version of the artwork? Or what are the things you can do even outside of social media to help you push the podcast? Where the spaces you can go? What are the things you need to consider? But I think outside, I think anything that's a structural issue has a solution that might not be what is considered the norm.
Yeah.
And so allow yourself to, like Melissa said, throw the box away and figure it out for yourself, but be ready to do the work as well. Because I don't say there's a lot of noise but there is a lot of noise when it comes to podcasts. We have statistics that I think it's like 80% of podcasts don't go beyond the third episode. And of the remaining, I think 60 something percent don't go beyond the 20th episode. And so I'm like, if we all created a podcast today, one of us would not be there by next week, but one, and then in 2 months, the other one wouldn't be there. So what is it that makes me the person who continues going in spite of, despite, insert all the spite words. But yeah, I think structurally, tongue twister, discoverability is something you need to consider. And how can you, as you start your podcast or think about it, figure out ways that you can push your podcast, I think would be something you must consider.
Yeah, and for someone who's thinking of starting this journey and who's already started and they're wondering whether it's them, is it me? Am I the problem? No, it's not you, because things are still in the early stage, and I'm not saying this to excuse the problem, but I will say, for example, like 5 years ago, or in 2019 when we were starting all this, there was no KOFISI studio. This did not exist. There was no Africa Podcast Day. Radio Workshop had not put all the training online, So the solutions exist for these structural problems. It's just that they're also growing, so they're not scaled out yet. Afripods
was just
starting,
The tech hadn't been built to the level,
So these the solutions to the problem you might be facing, the question you're asking yourself now as a podcaster might, for example, I want to make a narrative, I want to upskill. Where will I learn? There are no colleges or programs online to teach me this skill, where I can learn this skill, especially as an African. It's not that it doesn't exist, it's just that it'll be harder to find.
Because it's also growing.
Yeah, but it's also growing. So that's why you need to grab all the opportunities you can. So attend the events. Make sure you listen to all the podcasts about African podcasting that exist, because the information is out there. You just need to really look for it. I mean, not
Follow
that you
the
have to look
communities.
for it too hard. I mean, just Google, just search, like, how do I find African podcasting information? You get all the information that's there. So the solutions are there. It's just that we're still in that stage, in the early days of it's still a seedling, if I may call it that. It's not yet it's still a nursery, but it's not become a forest where it's easy. So it's not easy, but also, the state of the world right now, right, is chaotic. Listen, we're still growing, right? We're not in our collapse era, we're in our growth era. So it's also about perspective and mindset. And it's also a great opportunity right now with the chaos that's going on in the global power structures, if I may call them that we grew up in, that are now shifting, and there are cracks now. That's the window for us to do new things, for us to tell our stories, for us to just be out there experimenting. Because when an old system falls, that's when new opportunities emerge.
Chaos is a ladder.
Chaos can be a ladder for people who are looking for opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Is there space, now that you said, in 2019, KOFISI 9 Media Studio wasn't here. Is there still space for physical spaces? Is there room for physical spaces? Apologies for that. Is there room for physical spaces like this podcast studio, in a place where, you can record it under your blanket and put it online?
Oh, yeah.
100%. And I feel like, because even if you think about any other medium, so even if it's YouTube, Mr. Beast exists, who has a whole team, fancy cameras, a travel agent. He's still on YouTube. But on YouTube, there's someone who has their phone that's probably grainy, but I'm like, both of them exist in the exact same space. There's no way that you can be like, one should not exist or one is more important than the other. The other thing is, why structures are important is because I feel like as you grow, your need becomes different. One, I feel like a lot of times when I tell people start, I don't want you to get stuck in the space where you're like, I don't have the money to go to a studio. And that's why I say, get your phone, start the thing. But then if you had the money, there's a freedom in being able to come into a space, talk to the mics, into the mics, and have someone else do the work. There's a space for that. There's a space for like outside of your studio for us to be able to meet, like we've been saying, it's so important for podcasters to meet, to be able to get out of the box, to stop feeling like they're the only ones doing a thing. We need spaces to be able to do that. You guys are a really good space for that. Baraza has been a really good space for that. I think it's important for creatives to be able to sit together, because also as creatives, we have to feed off of each other. And if we're together in spaces, I think we become more creative. I am a creative, but I am more of a creative with more creatives around me. There's something you'll say that will trigger a thing in me, and I'll be like, actually, that's a good idea for a podcast. Or, I feel like that might be a good script. Or I feel like, but it's not that we were talking about scripting. It's just, maybe it's Melissa's hairstyle. If you can't see it, I'm sorry. Go to the artwork. But I'm like, she has beads in her hair, and it would be like, there's something about the way the beads are that I'm like, actually, it would be interesting to do a podcast on hairstyles. It's like, what did we do traditionally? Why did we do them? Did we have like specific hairstyles for like different seasons? Or is it like based on your age group? Or is it like based on married women could do this way, and we like single women had to do this, and if you had a child, you did this, and then, such things where I'm like, the thought of it only comes because I was around Melissa and she had beads in her hair. So I think spaces are very important, very, very important for creatives. Even if we're going to come and stay at the wall, there's something about just being able to be in a space, stay at the art and be like, oh, it triggered something in me. So 100% spaces are important.
Yeah, I agree with Gathoni entirely, and I'll add, when as you grow, like say as your show continues to grow, if you're going to be able to focus on say being the host and making great stories, and that's your job on this show. To do that, you're going to need someone else to handle all the other bits, the sound tech, the engineering, the sound design, the marketing, etc. And a space like KOFISI, like this morning, all I did was look at the questions, think about the questions you said, think about how I was going to, my energy level, just prepare for this to be here talking. If we were recording this, ourselves without being in this space, we'd have had to then also think about all the other things, like, okay, which closet are we going to enter? Who's
Can we
bringing the
fit in the
blanket?
closet?
Yeah, So there's a lot of value in efficiency, which and as you grow, then efficiency becomes your priority. So they're different. So what Gathoni said, is about community. You need that all the time throughout your journey, especially in the beginning, because you need that community of support in the beginning, and then you need it also to sustain yourself. You need community, but people might consider, a studio like this is too fancy, and why would anyone need it when these days we work remotely? No, we still need it. And if you want to just produce consistent quality at a certain level, you can't escape needing this kind of infrastructure.
And the people around it, because I'm like, you have a technical team that understands. I'm like, I could listen to, it happened to, so I have a podcast, and there's an episode we recorded and we thought it was fine because when we were talking, everything was fine. And then when we listened to the episode, there was absolute echo coming in from the person we were interviewing, because I think they didn't have their headphones in and we didn't realize it, because when we were talking, it seemed fine. But I'm like, the fact that you have a technician going to be like, okay, guys, wait. There's an issue with your mic, or go closer to your mic, or there's an echo, and there's someone to be able to do that. And it's not a thought I have to have. As a creative, it does help. So 100% having the people who know what it is they're doing, it eases the burden of the work as a creative.
Yeah.
All right. And for even better ease into your work, make sure you find Afripods and Radio Workshop to help you start out or continue with your journey wherever you're at. And also KOFISI. Come to KOFISI 9 here in Westlands, and we'll be able to help you out with your audio storytelling needs. Make sure you come through to KOFISI Kaskazi on General Mathenge Drive. That's in Westlands, Nairobi, on the 12th of February, Thursday, where you will get to meet Gathoni and Melissa to continue this conversation of this podcast on how, your journey is like, or how we can build community around audio storytelling. To close it up, Melissa, how can creatives, podcasters get to be helped or join or be a part of Radio Workshop? And also same question to Gathoni. And then we can call it a wrap.
Yeah. Well, for starters, on all the social media, just follow Radio Workshop. Radio Workshop in the conventional spellings of those two words. Also, you can check out the podcast on all the podcast platforms called Radio Workshop, and our website, radioworkshop.org.
Gathoni.
You can find us at Afripods on all social media platforms. And then the website is afripods.africa. We offer free podcast hosting. So if you have a podcast thinking of starting one, you go to afripods.africa, create your account for free. If you already have an existing podcast and want to migrate, it's a 3-step process. You can check out our YouTube channel at Afripods again. It'll give you details on how to migrate and do all of that. But we also have a lot of resources on there for if you're trying to grow your community and things like that. There's a lot of conversations. We have Pod Connect every other month, and we've had a lot of conversations where you can learn about things in podcasting. If it's law, understanding like contracts and things like that, understanding like KRA and things like that, or even how to do storytelling and things and advertising and how to deal with marketers. There are all these stories that are on that space. So check out Afripods everywhere and join us on the 12th of February as we celebrate Africa Podcast Day.
Yes, celebrate with us, and all that will be happening. It is an experiential session. So it's immersive, it's a workshop. You can do a live recording. You can come through to this podcast studio on that day and do your 10-minute voiceover or intro. We'll get all those facilities to you. So please make sure that you are there. My name is Richard Okenye. I've been the host for this podcast. This is the KOFISI Connect podcast. I'll catch you in the next episode.